Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where our mission is to join together to create a nourishing, liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world, or as we say in short, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. I do want to begin by welcoming all of you, as always, embracing all of your uniqueness, your unique beliefs and background and lifestyle and experiences and differences, all that make you who you are welcome here this morning. And this includes those who hear me say this every Sunday, as well as those who might be hearing it for the first time today, as well as those of you who are streaming with us this morning. I want to welcome all of you. I also want to begin by acknowledging that it is another difficult day for us and for our nation. This seems to be something I say just about every Sunday and have had to do for the past couple of years, so I'm doubly sorry, but I guess a lot of ministers would feel compelled to get up and say something really smart and wise to make you feel better. I can't do that because one, I don't have anything, and two, that would not be right. We need to face the brutal realities that we're in, and when our Supreme Court is taken over, especially after hearings that made the candidate for that position unqualified. It's a brutal reality. So the best I can do is name it and to say that I too am in pain and in grief and have anger and all of those things that I know many of you are feeling too, and that we're in this together. If being together creates some sort of catharsis, then that's great, but I wanted to at least begin our service by saying I'm sorry. I feel your pain, or I feel my pain, which I imagine is something like yours. So, segueing to a more positive thing, this is the time of year where we are gathering your contributions for our annual community auction, when we share services and different events and gatherings to raise both lots of fun, to build community, and also to do some fundraising for our congregation. So we're trying to get as many donation forms turned in as possible. We're a little behind what we normally have, so please do so as soon as you can. You'll be able to get one of these forms in the back today if you haven't already filled one out, or you can go online and fill it out, but please do so within the next couple of days. It would be greatly appreciated. And I have two here that I need to turn in myself from Peggy and I. So Heather, if you're still here, don't let me forget to give these to you before we leave. Then I also wanted to remind you that after our service today, probably about 12:30, we're going to have a 50-minute showing of a video that is on YouTube about what happened to a Unitarian Universalist congregation in Massachusetts after they showed a film called The Occupation of the American Mind, which is about how the American media doesn't usually present what is going on regarding the Palestinians. And we want to show that film to the public. But in realizing that this church had some negative repercussions from their showing of it, it seems that it needs to be part of a community conversation. So I would like you to see the discussion by members of this congregation who had to deal with the aftermath of showing this documentary. And then on the 28th, about 1 o'clock, which that's also the kickoff to our community auction. So after you've had plenty of time to enjoy lunch and bid on some items, we're going to have a specially called congregational meeting to vote on whether or not we want to show the occupation of the American mind to the greater public. Okay. So if you're interested at all in this, please stay around about 12:30 today. We'll probably do it in here if there's a big crowd. If not, we may move into the chapel. Okay? Thank you so much. And in the spirit of our togetherness, let's take a few moments as usual to greet one another. As always, I hope that you will say hi to those you know and love and make some new friends today. And if you are joining us for the first time, please don't be shy. We don't bite, and we're glad you're here. Thank you so much. As always, there will be more time to visit with one another after our service during our social hour. And yes, I also forgot to remind you that we're going to have a couple of opportunities for the poetry lovers in our community here next weekend. Reverend Linda Wittenberg, a former minister here, is going to be in town. She'll be speaking Sunday, but she'll also be doing a poetry of her latest works. Stone by Stone, I think, is the name of that collection, here on Friday night. And then on Sunday, that following Sunday, we're going to have a gathering of poets right here in our community, giving a reading. The doors will open at 6:30 and then for a discussion, and then the poetry readings will start at 7. So again, check your, I hope it's in the focus this morning, but your information for that. So, okay, with that said, let's go move forward by lighting our chalice, the symbol of our faith, the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need, and may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found.
Our opening words this morning are from Joan Javier Duval. Here is where you can lay it down. Lay down all that you have carried, the weight of the world that has rounded your back, leaving you aching and exhausted. Here is where healing begins, where burdens are set down, and alongside one another's, their magnitude does not seem as great. Here is where the door is thrown open and the light can lift away the shadows, and what was hidden can now be seen. Here is where you can rest, where nothing is expected but that you bring all of who you are into the presence of the holy and of this loving community. Let us worship together.
Sometimes it helps to ground ourselves in the things that we still actually have and appreciate and value. So please, in that spirit, stand to sing number 19, The Sun That Shines.
Hear me? I see some young people here. Come over. Come over. I have something to show you. Not very many pictures, but still, you will see better from here. And you can have a seat, the front row. See? Right. Good. Wonderful. Oh, wow. I am so pleased that you are here to listen to my story. Not you, but some other people told me, well, since Luba is going to tell a story, it's going to be a Russian story. No. My story is going to be about a choir. Oh, surprised? Yeah. Many people like to sing. Do you like to sing? Yeah. Some people like to sing solo. Some people sing in a group, in chorus. When I grew up in a Russian town as a child, I loved to sing, but when nobody was at home. And the reason being because singing solo was not my strength. See, I was dreaming of singing in a choir because I was always curious how so many different voices can blend together nicely. That is why I joined the elementary school choir. And I joined the choir, there's a little secret, without being able to read the notes. The music was... So, I still don't know how to read the music, but at that time, I began to understand the language of the music. And I learned that when we sing or play 3 or more notes together at once, we have a chord. You know what chord is? Not that chord that you tie things with. No, it's a musical chord that can sound sad or joyful depending on the melody. Here comes the question for you guys. Do you know what makes choir singing special? Yes, you do. Everybody singing together. That's a good answer. And harmony that is produced by 2 or more voices, in case of a choir, many voices. You know that one word isn't a story, right? Yes. Yeah. What about one stroke of a paintbrush? Does it make a painting, a picture? No, it doesn't. What happens if we draw several strokes with different colors? What do we have?
A rainbow.
Oh, yes. We can have a rainbow, or we may draw this picture. Look, this was drawn by the child. Or this picture. See? For me, singing in a choir and harmony is like having those musical chords, having harmony, like colors, multiple colors in a painting. When we sing in a choral group, these invisible chords that you hear create connection between us. By the way, some people believe that it was singing, not words, that came first as means of human bonding. When I came for the first time to this church about 23 years ago, I was lost and I felt lonely. Do you know what should a lonely person do? Yes, and you know what?
It could get more humans.
Get more human? Oh, yeah, that's interesting. And what about you?
Find help, basically.
Find somebody, yeah? Oh, wow. There, you know what a lonely person should do. But I think that a lonely person should follow one of the principles of this church. Do you know which principle of this church? Do you know? Create community. Create community or become part of a group. So naturally, once I heard the church choir sing, I went to talk to the choir director, Debbie. And Debbie took me into her singing community. And I became happy. Because in this choir, I found true friends that helped me a lot. Well, they say that performing in a choir, in a group, gives people a pleasing sense of belonging. But there is another special thing about choir. Choral singers share with the others something together. And by the way, I know a Russian song about togetherness. It's not going to be in Russian, no. I made a translation. My translation is not perfect, but this is the chorus of the song. There is much more fun to be joined together, walk together, sing together, And of course, we prove much stronger together, all together, all together. In Russian, the word together is вместе. Not everybody can pronounce this word, it's difficult. So I decided to look up on the internet the sign language for this word together, and that's what I found. I'll show you. American Sign Language together. Can you do this? Together, together, together. And the Russian Sign Language for вместе is like that. Together. Do you see the similarity? Together, together. Or this. Well, if you can, please sign either this or that, the word together, when you hear this song. There is much more fun to be joined together, walk together, sing together, and of course we prove much stronger together, all together, all together. Thank you, dear. Now let's sing the children out.
We now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which sustains this community and its mission to the larger world.
We'll now kindle our candles of care for those who are most on our hearts and minds this morning, and have a request here for a candle on behalf of the indigenous peoples of Alaska who have been displaced from their homes because of climate change and have been rallying there this week, fighting for their environmental rights, along with the those working for and those supporting the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, including some supporters in our own congregation who have been working on this issue with them. And a candle for pretty much our entire nation today. We will take a moment of silence, as always, on behalf of others that you might be thinking of. And as always, you're welcome to name them aloud if you'd like. Aloud, and those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering in our world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion. We're going to have a few moments now to hear from one of our members about an important issue that impacts the lives of many of us. Tom and Mary Mosier are going to be heading south for a while, and even though this topic doesn't necessarily fit in with the theme of my sermon, I wanted to give Tom a chance to share something very important with our community before they head south.
Thanks. Well, I'm here to ask you this morning if each of you will consider helping to cure Alzheimer's disease. Yesterday was the March for Alzheimer's disease. As you may know, a lot of us give money, a lot of us marched in that march. What I want to do is ask each of you 65 years of older to raise your hand. Statistically, 1 in 10 of us who raised our hands will be diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, may already have it, and don't know it. Statistically, of these 1 in 10 persons, going to have a care partner, caregiver. So that's every 5th one of us. My wife, Mary, and I are one of the every 5th ones. Mary was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, probably going to be Alzheimer's disease. I want to tell you a little bit about that. She's not here today, but she's mildly affected, and most people wouldn't notice anything if you were having conversation with her. But what was important for us at that time in Phoenix about 2.5 years ago was Mary felt that she had some issues that were a little more than what she thought she should have with memory. So we sought an evaluation in the Phoenix area, and we got back when she was involved with some testing and some experimental testing and that sort of thing, and we did receive an evaluation, as I said. Now, as you will hear a little later in Todd's sermon, when you're dealt a hand of cards, there's some things you can do with it. You can fold them and ignore them as a bad hand of cards, or you can do something about it. Mary decided there was something to be done about it. So we got involved with studies, questionnaires on the web with doctors, and also with some clinical drug trials. The Alzheimer's Association, which there's some information in the back, is very important. There's a local chapter here on the South Hill. They are helpful from everybody who may be thinking they need an evaluation and how to go about it, to financial planning as things progress, and there may be things you need to do financially. Workshops, lectures, all kinds of assistance and aid. So please know that resource is available in the community. So how can you get involved? How can you help with this? Well, one of the things and the reasons why we're going to do this, we should be willing to do this, not only for ourselves, but for our kids and our grandkids. Because there is a cure somewhere out there, and the only way we can get to that cure is money, investigation, and people that will get involved in studies, whether you're symptomatic or not, and people who get involved in clinical drug trials. Think about the polio vaccine back in the 50s. That didn't happen overnight. That happened with decades, if not years and years, of study and people willing to get involved in surveys, questionnaires, whether they were symptomatic, had polio or not, and those who were willing to get involved with drug trials. So that's what I'm wanting you to think about a little bit more. Mary's involved in one clinical drug trial. I met somebody else this morning in the first service who's involved in the same clinical drug trial. Mary's being screened for a second clinical drug trial, both with different approaches. We need to get people involved who don't have Alzheimer's, who aren't symptomatic at this point. And there's a very good resource for that called Trial Match. And scattered around on the chairs this morning is information about Trial Match. They're particularly looking at this point for people non-symptomatic between the ages of 55 and 75 years of age to become involved. And if you contact the association either by phone or with the website that's there, and there are some forms that are scattered around, they will contact you and try and kind of screen you to see what level of involvement do you want to become involved with. It can be very cursory or it can be very intense. It can last for a few months or a few weeks, and can last for a few years. But the only way we're going to get to a solution is for all of us to take whatever role we can perceive that we can possibly take. And that's my message to you. Early evaluation, because it's been so helpful to Mary and me. I can't imagine where we would even be now if we hadn't had the help that comes through the various resources in the community. And then second of all, please consider that Trial Match and getting involved in some way so that you can help out and try to cure this so our kids and our grandkids don't have to put up with this.
Thank you all so much. And Tom, thanks again for you and Mary being willing to share your story for the welfare of our community. During the 1992 televised debate between vice presidential candidates Al Gore, Dan Quayle, and billionaire populist Ross Perot's choice for a running mate, James Stockdale, the latter introduced himself to the nation by uttering two questions. Do you remember them? Who am I? Why am I here? They were the perfect questions to set the nation at ease with this unfamiliar, unvetted Washington outsider. Almost everyone had been wondering the same thing about Stockdale. Who was he and why was he Perot's pick? The live audience laughed at his self-deprecating humor, which also immediately endeared him to viewers all over the country. Unfortunately for Stockdale and Ross Perot, his moment as a wise, funny, white-headed grandfatherly figure didn't last long. As the evening transpired, his seeming inability to intelligibly answer questions just as quickly turned him into a national joke, including being portrayed on Saturday Night Live as a befuddled, senile old man by actor Phil Hartman, for those who remember Phil Hartman. So he was kind of like the Sarah Palin of his day. By the time the debate was over, perhaps the only people left whom Stockdale had permanently endeared himself to were our nation's philosophers, whose minds were made up about him almost the moment that he started speaking. He had us with, who am I? Why am I here? Today, even those unfamiliar with philosophy understand that these are quintessential philosophical questions, perennial questions dating back thousands of years. We can trace them back at least to Athens in the 4th century BCE, about 300 years after philosophy simultaneously began in Greece and China and India. Prior to this philosophy, Professor William Irvine says Philosophers were primarily interested in explaining the world around them and the phenomenon of that world, in doing what we would now call science. This changed when Socrates came along in the 4th century BCE, whom, as one translator puts it, was the first to call philosophy down from the heavens and set her in the cities of men to ask questions about life and morality and things good and evil. In his general introduction to the Stoic and Epicurean philosophers, W.J. Oates, who describes philosophy as the speculative spirit of inquiry into life and the universe, confirms that in its earliest stages, the orientation of philosophy was to the external world. Philosophers initially tried to figure out physics, how things worked. Thales thought that it was all made of water. Anaximenes said that it was air, and Heraclitus argued fire was the primary element within all things. And it wasn't long before Democritus became the very first person in history to come up with an atomic theory of reality way back in the 5th century BCE. Of course, this was the golden age of Greek civilization, when the Athenians could enjoy the freedom to make such speculations. 100 years later, after the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta, Athens lay in ruins, the countryside destroyed, widespread poverty ensued, and the citizens of Greece's once strongest city-state became completely subjugated. When the breakdown of the small Greek city-state, Samuel Enoch Stump writes, individual citizens lost the sense of their own importance and their ability to control or perfect their social and political destiny. Individuals increasingly felt the loss over collective life, and they were absorbed into the growing Roman Empire. Can you relate to that? Broken, oppressed, despondent, always anxious about the future. The Greeks were no longer interested in theoretical speculations about the nature of reality, for they already knew the nature of their own painful reality all too well. What they needed, Stump says, was a practical philosophy to give life direction under changing conditions. Philosophy therefore shifted to this practical emphasis in a mood of increasing concern for the immediate world of the individual. As one of those ancient philosophers, Epictetus, said, "What do I care whether all existing things are composed of atoms or indivisibilities or of fire and earth? Is it not enough to learn the true nature of good and evil?" Epictetus represents one of a small handful of philosophies at the time that began emphasizing ataraxia, which means peace of mind or tranquility of mind. The philosophy that I want to talk about today, Stoicism. To do so, I thought it might be fun to talk about one of my favorite Stoics, James Bond, who relies upon its wisdom to survive a horrible ordeal. His fans may have read about the time that he was piloting a small plane over enemy territory. He always keeps a copy of Epictetus's handbook with him, much of which he's memorized. Epictetus was born a Roman slave around 50 CE, only to become one of the most revered Stoic philosophers of all time. James Bond discovered him while studying international relations at the university, and bored wandered into the philosophy department, where a kindly professor gave him a copy of Epictetus's writings. His philosophy can almost be summed up in a line that my Stoic friend Dan Ekret, I know Dan is here, often says to me: "You've got to take the hand you're dealt and play it the best you can." Which for the Stoic means being your best, even in the worst of times. James Bond had just been thinking of something Epictetus said when he was dealt an unexpectedly bad hand. His aircraft was struck by enemy fire, forcing him to eject. As his parachute opens and he realizes that he's floating down directly into enemy hands, he thinks, "I'm leaving the world of technology and entering the world of Epictetus." And before saying more about what happens next, I should tell you that I've been playing a bit of a trick on you. For I'm not talking about the familiar James Bond character created by fiction writer Ian Fleming in 1953. I'm talking about the original James Bond, the real James Bond, born 30 years earlier in 1923. I'm talking about James Bond Stockdale, the same bumbling debater who may have single-handedly ruined Ross Perot's chances of ever becoming president of the United States. During a speech on Stoicism that he later gave before the U.S. Naval Academy, the retired Vice Admiral, the only three-star naval officer in history to wear both aviator wings and the Medal of Honor, along with 2 Flying Crosses, 3 Distinguished Service Medals, 4 Silver Stars, and 2 Purple Hearts, began by explaining, "When I debated Al Gore and Dan Quayle on television in October 1992 as candidates for vice president, I began my remarks with 2 questions that are perennially debated by every thinking human being. Who am I? Why am I here?" The questions were relevant in terms of the evening's purpose, which was to introduce myself and let the American people know where I was coming from. But I also chose them for their broader relevance to my life. I am a philosopher. In addition to his extraordinary military honors, after retiring, James Bond Stockdale served as president of the Citadel for a year and as college professor at Stanford University's philosophy department, where he served as a senior research fellow of Stoicism for 15 years. He also held 11 honorary degrees and many other honors, too numerous to mention. And a few years prior to that infamous 1992 debate, he'd already been portrayed on television by another famous actor, James Woods, in a 1987 movie based on the book In Love and War, which he co-authored with his wife Sybil, about her fight for humane treatment of POWs during Vietnam. Once on the ground, James Bond Stockdale was immediately mobbed and brutally beaten, his arms bound tight around his back, forcing him to walk almost hunched in half with a badly broken leg that would hobble him for the rest of his life. Stoicism's first principle, which Epictetus' handbook begins with, is, "Some things are up to us, and some things are not up to us." Learning to distinguish between what we can and can't control is the essence of Stoic wisdom. What is up to me, Stockdale understood, even during the panic of his capture, his body broken and inflamed, his fate uncertain, though certainly not good. Within my power, within my will, are my opinions, my aims, my aversions, my own grief, my own joy, my attitude about what is going on, my own good and my own evil. It was this belief, no matter how harsh his circumstances, no matter how brutally he was treated, that he could remain master of his fate, that allowed James Bond Stockdale to survive nearly 8 years of imprisonment, torture, leg irons, and solitary confinement without losing his soul or his sanity. His tormentors may have had control over his body, but only he could control his attitude about it all, which kept him free and powerful. But Stoicism should not for a moment be confused with the power of positive thinking, or with denial, or with ignorance. You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, Stockdale says, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be. For Stoicism is based on three foundations: physics, by which is meant empiricism and objectivity, dealing with the facts, dealing with the world as it is, on its own terms, outside of one's wishes and imagination. Ethics, which means remaining true to oneself, whatever one's reality is. And reason. Reason, which means being self-aware, deciding how we will respond to life, and knowing the difference between what we can and can't control. Stockdale could not control falling into enemy hands, or being beaten and tortured, or being in pain, or being arrested and treated like a criminal. Yet by the time he was finally brought to the Hanoi Hilton, Stoic philosopher Massimo Pigliucci says, Stockdale had resolved to do precisely as Epictetus advised, to play whatever part fate had allotted him to the best of his abilities. During his 7.5 years as a POW, more than half of which he spent in solitary confinement, 2 of them in leg irons, he held no ill will toward his captors, even though they tortured him 15 times. As the highest ranking officer present, he managed to organize the other American prisoners, which grew from 30 to 466 over the years of his imprisonment. And he developed policies that allowed them to survive torture without giving away valuable information, and to help them maintain their own sense of integrity and dignity. Though he never mentioned the word Stoicism to any of them, Stockdale says it was Epictetus who made it all possible. He's been with me in combat, leg irons with me, spent month-long stretches and blindfolds with me. He has been in the ropes with me, has taught me that my true business is maintaining control over my moral purpose. In fact, that my moral purpose is who I am. He taught me that I am totally responsible for everything I do and say, and that it is I who decides on and controls my own destructions and my own deliverance. While imprisoned, he sometimes injured his own face so that its image couldn't be used in propaganda. And before the war was over, after he'd finally been completely isolated to prevent him from encouraging and influencing the other prisoners, Stockdale decided to commit suicide. This wasn't because he was depressed or lost hope, but because Stoicism keeps an open door on the subject of death. They didn't consider life always good and death always an evil. In general, as Epictetus' beloved teacher, Musonius Rufus, the Roman Socrates, said, Stoics believe that one who by living is of use to many has not the right to choose to die, unless by dying one may be of use to more. Yet Musonius also taught, since the fates have spun out the lot of death for all alike, one is blessed who dies not late but well. The Stoic view on death was inspired by the death of Socrates, who died with integrity, even though he was wrongly accused and falsely sentenced, and had every opportunity to escape. Though they considered it unethical and cowardice to commit suicide just to avoid life, they also believed the fear of death negatively impacts our peace of mind, our tranquility of mind, our ataraxia. Musonius said that we should think of death not as an evil and life not as a good. In other words, there are things that are worse than dying, and the inevitability of dying is one of those things that is out of our control. Given that all must die, again, Musonius said, it is better to die well than to live long. Perhaps it was the statement made by his ancient mentor Epictetus himself that inspired James Bond Stockdale to step through the open door. I must die, must I? Epictetus said. If at once, then I am dying. If soon, I dine now, for it is dinner time. And afterwards, when the time comes, I will die. And die how? As befits one who gives back what is not one's own. Fortunately, Stockdale was discovered before he died and saved by his captors. He was soon after released as the nightmarish war came to an end, and he went on to talk much about his experiments in what he called his Stoic laboratory at the Hanoi Hilton, and to unintentionally help prevent Ross Perot from becoming president. After all, nobody wants a populist billionaire in the White House. So let me now turn to a more direct explanation of Stoicism and why I think it's important for us today. It was founded by Zeno of Citium, Cyprus, around 300 BCE. While shipwrecked in Athens, he went to a bookseller and asked where he might meet a philosopher. At that moment, Crates the cynic happened by, and the bookseller exclaimed, "Follow yonder man." Zeno became Crates' student, but eventually began teaching his own philosophy to those who assembled to hear him speak on the Stoa Poikile, which means the painted porch. That's how the Stoics got their name, the porch people, the people who met near the porch. Stoicism is based on the premise that virtue is the greatest good because it is the only thing that is valuable in all circumstances. Everything else is indifferent, which means nothing else matters, really. Unlike those other philosophies seeking eudaimonia, happiness, through ataraxia, peace of mind, like Epicureanism, which pursued it through pleasure, and Cynicism, which pursued it through abstinence and discomfort, Stoics were allowed to seek preferred indifference, to seek things that were pleasurable but didn't really matter, and to avoid dispreferred indifference, so long as doing either, seeking pleasure or avoiding pain, didn't diminish one's virtue. And by virtue they meant wisdom, the ability again to know the difference between what we can and can't control. Courage, the ability to maintain one's own integrity even in the face of suffering and death. Justice, recognizing that we are social creatures and must take care of and responsibility for the welfare of others. And temperance, being able to restrain oneself, that is, to be in control of the things that we can control. The Stoics believed people are unhappy because they always want what they don't have. So to achieve eudaimonia, literally a good spirit by achieving peace of mind, we must find a way to be happy with what we already have. And they developed some novel ways of doing this. First, the dichotomy of control, which I've already mentioned, meaning distinguishing the difference between what we can and what we can't control. Instead of wasting time worrying about what we can't control, which is what most people do, worry about what we can't control, we should concentrate on what we can control, which is mostly our own attitude about things. Thus, instead of having external goals in our endeavors, we should internalize our goals. And the runner, for example, should not strive to win a race, but to run the race at one's very best, whatever the outcome. And this can further be aided through an attitude of fatalism. Don't let that scare you. It's not fatalism regarding the future, but recognizing that we can't change the past or the present for that matter, since one is over and the other is already upon us. It's already upon us, right? Instead, we should do what we can to impact the potential future for the good of others without clinging to its outcome. Another technique for achieving peace of mind, or ataraxia, to be of good spirit, eudaimonia, is practicing premeditio malorum. And I love that term because I think it sounds like something Harry Potter would say, right? Premeditio malorum. But it actually means foreseeing bad things or negative visualization. That's a scary thought. Meditating on negative things, negative images. And this wasn't about desensitizing ourselves to loss and grief so we don't feel it when it comes, but imagining what it might be like to lose the things that we most value. Our wealth, our possessions, our reputation, our loved ones, even our own lives, to make us appreciate what we have so that we can be content in the here and now rather than taking them for granted. As Musonius said again, it is not possible to live well today unless one thinks of it as one's last day. Although some of their ideas were prudish, the Stoics were socially progressive even by today's standards in many ways. Stockdale says, the Stoics held that all human beings were equal in the eyes of God, male and female, black and white, slave and free. Like many in the ancient world, they believed that children should obey their parents, but get this, not indiscriminately. Not if a parent asks a child to do something that's wrong. They should disobey, because that better honors their parents. And they especially advocated for equality of the sexes, and for education of girls, and for the right of women to become philosophers. Musonius said, and this is pretty awesome, think about the double entendre here. The female has the same sense as the male, namely sight, hearing, smell, and the others. Also, both have the same parts of the body, and the one has nothing more than the other. They additionally thought that political leaders should study philosophy for their own good and for the good of their citizens. Stockdale may not have made it into the White House, but 2,000 years ago, during Stoicism's heyday, a Stoic philosopher named Marcus Aurelius became Roman emperor. As such, he did not overspend. He respected the Senate and used his own authority with great restraint. He was the last of Rome's great emperors. In The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, Edward Gibbon wrote, "If one were called upon to fix the period in history of the world during which the condition of the human race was most happy and prosperous, one would without hesitation name that which elapsed between Nerva and the death of Marcus Aurelius, the only period of human history in which the happiness of a great people was the sole object of government." Today, as in ancient Greece, it seems there is much that is beyond our control. I'm probably getting in trouble for saying something. Getting a call, is that it? "500-year-old racist systems still continue, even as white supremacists, white nationalists, and Nazis march in our streets and draw swastikas on Jewish community centers. Our planet is burning up and melting while our government dismantles environmental protections. And the rights and safety of women are once again being trounced upon at the highest levels. Our country has fallen into enemy hands. The Supreme Court being the latest casualty in a once democratic nation that's being absorbed into a growing authoritarian empire. The parallels between ancient Athens and modern America are enough to suggest that rediscovering Stoicism might help us today as well. Epictetus once asked, "What do you think would have become of Hercules if there had not been a lion in the story, and a hydra, and a stag, and a boar, and unjust and brutal men, whom he drove forth and cleansed the world of? What would he have done if there had been nothing of this sort?" The point is, the challenges that Hercules faced allowed him to prove his strength, just as the challenges before us cannot change who we are and provide us the opportunity to take charge of what we can control and to be at our best even in the worst of times. Today we can't change the outcomes of past elections or alter the makeup of the Supreme Court as it exists today. We can waste time worrying about these things, wishing that we could change them, or we can strive to do our best in these troubling times, living up to our own standards, to our own values, as people of goodwill and virtue, doing what we can do to help shape tomorrow. Whatever else may befall us, no one can take these things from us. They are ours. They are ours alone. They are what make us free, and they are what make our lives worth living. Thank you.
For me, it helps to anchor back into the planet and to realize that that's a very much larger reality than the political one we live in. Please stand as you're willing and able to sing "O Brother's Son," number 1066.
I wrote our closing words under the assumption that I am not the only one in the room who is experiencing deep anger today. The anger that burns within you. No need to turn away from it. When it threatens to scorch you, rest, breathe, but do not disguise, downplay, or deny it. Be attentive to the direction that anger is pointing. And once you have rested, only once you have rested, with companions at your side, go there. There is holy work to be done. Amen. Blessed be. Salam alaikum and shalom.